Oh, I didn't see you there. My name is Joel Hugger.
And I made this video because I'm mandatorily required to for history class. 4 days before this project was due, I have finally got inspired by the due date to start writing my project down. And because I'm on a never-ending quest to be difficult and do things my way, my first thought was, how do I turn this project into an opportunity for me to watch movies? So I present to you my condensed recount of American history told via movies. Organized into 3 separate parts, acts, if you will, are movies that represent or tell the story of a specific time span. My time is already ticking, so without further preamble, Act 1, Settlement to Reconstruction. What better movie to represent early American history than the cinematic masterpiece that is A Charlie Brown Thanksgiving? Now, I'm assuming that if you're not an uncultured degenerate like Blake, then you've already seen this movie. It depicts the Mayflower voyage as well as how life was in early American settlement. Skipping over to 1776, we have the musical Hamilton, which, though following Alex, it exposes us to different historical and significant figures and events, such as George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and the American Revolution. Next on our list is Steven Spielberg's Lincoln, which not only tells the story of one of our greatest American presidents fighting for the 13th Amendment, but also introduces us to the Civil War, a war that leads us into our next film, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which concludes by depicting the Battle of Glorieta Pass. Leading us out of the Civil War era is 1939's Gone with the Wind, which covers Reconstruction. Lastly, Act 1 ends with Charlie Chaplin's Gold Rush, a comedy that shows America's growing innovation as well as, of course, the Yukon Gold Rush. Now, on to Act 2, World War I to World War II. Alright, now admittedly Reconstruction to World War I is a massive time jump, but it turns out there aren't any interesting or at least movie-worthy stories within that time period. Kicking off World War I, though, is Steven Spielberg's War Horse. It details the beginning of World War I as well as the drafts. Now, I will admit I am prejudiced against all horse movies, and so I don't recommend this one in the slightest. A movie I do recommend, though, is 1917, which takes place in, you guessed it, 1917, about 2 soldiers who try to relay a message across no man's land. Concluding World War I, and unlike Charlie Brown at Thanksgiving, is the actual cinematic masterpiece, a true cinematic achievement, Lawrence of Arabia, about a British soldier who fights alongside the Arabs to take Damascus from the Turks. A very interesting movie. Although the Great Depression happened during World War I, I'm putting O Brother, Where Art Thou Next, one of my favorite comedies about 3 escaped convicts during the Depression. Moving on to World War II, we have Hacksaw Ridge, an inspiring and heroic story, as all war films should be, about a man who refuses to fire a weapon during the war. Next are 2 surprisingly perfect complementary films, Darkest Hour and Dunkirk. Darkest Hour follows Winston Churchill as he writes his famous "We Will Fight" speech, and Dunkirk is obviously about the evacuation at Dunkirk. And in the end, the soldiers receive Churchill's famous speech. Greyhound is next, and depicts Tom Hanks leading the U.S. and British naval fleets into battle. There was one problem that I consistently had when writing the script, which was to find movies with a variety of genres. So, lastly, contrasting the bleakness of the last couple of films, I picked a movie called Jojo Rabbit, a comedy about a 10-year-old Nazi fanatic who ends up hiding a Jewish girl during the fall of Nazi Germany. Spoiler alert, the United States wins. Moving on to Act 3. Alright, Act 3. The Cold War to the 1980s. One of my newfound favorite genres of film is simply anti-communist, which is perfect considering the next couple of films, starting out with The Majestic. This movie is heavily based off of the real-life story of the Hollywood 10, It stars Jim Carrey as a movie producer who becomes accused of having communist sympathies. Next is Good Night and Good Luck. This movie, which is now one of my favorite films of all time, follows the back and forth fight between Joseph McCarthy and Edward Murrow. It also sets up a theme of journalism taking down government conspiracies, which we'll come back to later. Next is a rather unorthodox choice. It is Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This movie doesn't actually follow any real-life story, and instead this black comedy was made in the 60s, in the heat of the Cold War, and it expressed worry for these nuclear superpowers being in inept hands. Shifting away from the Cold War and into the space race, we have October Sky. Set shortly after the successful launch of the Soviet satellite Sputnik, this movie stars a scarily young Jake Gyllenhaal as he decides to make his own rocket. Now let's take a detour from the space race over to Ford v Ferrari, a movie I thought represented American innovation during the time. Now back over to the space race, we have the infamous Apollo 11 mission in First Man. It stars Ryan Gosling, and I mean, come on, it's the moon landing. What else can I say? Closely following First Man is Apollo 13. This movie details the almost disastrous Apollo 13 mission. Ignore the fact that Jim Lovell in this film looks almost exactly like the main character from Greyhound, and the main character in this next film, The Post. Steven Spielberg's The Post follows Tom Hanks as he uncovers this 30-year Vietnam War conspiracy for the Washington Post. Funnily enough, this movie ends with the Watergate break-in, which leads seamlessly into our next film, All the President's Men. This movie, set in 1972, follows Woodward and Bernstein as they uncover the Watergate conspiracy. Lastly, I wanted to pick a movie that really captured the era of the 80s and encapsulates really all of history, and I think I found the perfect movie. The '89 classic that I guess has been shunned by the public for no apparent reason. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. This movie about two teenagers who kidnap various historical figures for their history project is really the perfect end cap to this historical movie saga. I'm probably already past my allotted time, so I'll leave by quoting Edward Murrow's famous line, "Good night and good luck," or whatever time you're watching this at. You're still here? But the video's over. Go. Get out of here. It's done. It's over. Shoo. Go. Get out of here. Leave.